Good day, Bermuda. Thank you for joining us today. It is my pleasure to be joined by the Executive Director of Salvation Army, Ms. Beverly Daniels, and the Deputy Commissioner of St. John Ambulance, Mr. Craig Burt, and Senior Program Manager of Department of Child and Family Services, Ms. Renee Brown. As you know, Bermuda is a subtropical island, thus we are subject to storms and hurricanes. Culturally, many of us prepare for the hurricane season from June 1st to November 30th. However, we should prepare ourselves for deteriorating weather conditions year-round as we cannot predict nature. In fact, recently, we experienced a winter storm at the end of January, where, in light of the forecasted storm force winds and low temperatures, the disaster shelter opened to provide refuge for those most in need. Today, I wish to thank the Department of Child and Family Services, who set up and operate the shelter, as well as thank the community stakeholders, such as the Salvation Army, St. John Ambulance, the Red Cross, and the valuable volunteers to offer vital assistance in times of need. Bermuda, we are a community, and I encourage you to offer to one another, especially as we navigate uncertain times. We are looking for a pool of on-call volunteers who can assist with the setup and manning of the disaster shelter. And if you are in a position to volunteer, please reach out to the Department of Child and Family Services to volunteer your time to support our community when most needed. Please contact either Renee Brown or Knett Robinson on 296-7575. Today, I welcome our community stakeholders to join me. However, to ensure adequate physical distancing, we are only joined by two of our partnering organizations. I not only want to thank these organizations, but I also want to allow them the opportunity to educate the public on their importance and advise the best ways the public can support them. At this time, I will turn it over to Ms. Beverly Daniels, the Executive Director of Salvation Army.
Well, good morning. It is indeed a pleasure to be able to share with the public some of the things that the Salvation Army does, especially when there's a hurricane. In 2013, I came on board as the Executive Director, and fortunately or unfortunately, I came on in June. And I soon learned of another community partner that we were associated with, and that being the Child and Family Services team that works very, very diligently, and I might say very, in a very organized way to ensure that when the shelter at Cedar Bridge is pulled into existence, that those other key players, such as the Salvation Army, are notified. So early in June, we begin the meetings, and it's no fun sometimes hearing about the predictions. Sometimes it's going to be a very turbulent time, and other times not. The predictions are such that we don't have to worry, or at least we think we don't have to worry, but not to worry. The team goes into action, and it's amazing the chain of response. So I could be in Hamilton on a Saturday doing whatever I do on that day, be it browsing in shops, and I could get a call from a very gentle, lovely Renee Brown. Mrs. Daniels, just to let you know that a decision has been made by the EMO that we will open the shelter. And she will say it just like that. And then she might say, and this will happen tomorrow. Now, that means we have to, as they say, stop, drop, and roll. So my team then goes into action. I would call a Carol McDowell. Our primary remit within the shelter has been to provide food. And when I say provide food, that is the purchasing, cooking, and serving of that food. I need to be quick to add that while we go out and do all of the purchasing, we are, when we submit our invoices, reimbursed by government. But our remit is to go out and make sure that we have sufficient meals for the time that it's estimated that the shelter will be pulled into existence. That takes a concentrated effort. And while we have Carol McDowell, who's primarily responsible ahead of time for planning menus, and so our team has to meet in between there to make sure that we update our menus. That has been an interesting process over the years because, of course, our dietary needs have changed. You have people who are vegan, vegetarian, and then, of course, the rest of us who eat just about anything. And so we have to make sure that we allow for everyone's taste and needs. And that is inclusive of the people who come into the shelter because they need to come in, as well as it takes a lot to staff a shelter. And I have to give kudos to the team who pulled that together. It's an amazing process. It works like clockwork at this time because they have been very good at it. And they keep us informed as to what our rules are. So once Carol gets that call, we have a gentleman by the name of Maxwell Assing, who is our street ministry coordinator. His job is to go out and meet with the food bank coordinator, and they purchase the food for the menus that have been decided for that time. Then the cooking begins. Now, sometimes, especially if we get that call last minute, and it has to be last minute because you're dealing with nature, right? And so we get a call and it says, you need to make sure that you have supper for tomorrow. Well, sometimes what we do is we begin the preparation before we get in there. So we have that first meal cooked. Well, that takes additional volunteers. So Carol then pulls together the village. And in that village, she's going to have her mom and some of her aunts. It's quite the effort. And then we get into the facility. The food needs to be packed away. It needs to be cooked. And then this year, when we had the hurricane, of course, we're in COVID, right? And you don't serve food in an open way. It has to be packaged in a certain way. So that food had to be put into containers. They were served in that way. And then, of course, after a particular group came in, then you had to have that area sanitized and ready for the next group. And so kudos also to the Cedar Ridge team because they were there to take care of that business, and they did so very well. So while the Salvation Army does the food prep, we do so it's a really a team effort. Everyone within that environment is geared to making sure that those who are vulnerable, who have come into that space, are they're taken care of. I should add that Maxwell, in addition to helping to purchase the food and lift and all of that it takes, because it's a lot of food, depending on the numbers. And you'll hear more about the numbers later when I think the minister speaks. But Maxwell then goes out into the areas surrounding Hamilton, and he will pick up those homeless who have not made their way to Cedar Bridge and bring them along so that they too are protected. How do we need to call on the public for volunteers? What we have found within the Salvation Army, and I think most organizations have found this, there is an aging population. And so a lot of our seniors, people who come into the shelter with Carol, are people who are advanced in age. People like Lynn Can and her husband Lionel. Cal Ming goes in there. It's not a year that goes by that Cal Ming does not show up at the shelter, along with his wife, Juanita. and their daughter. Carol was their daughter, but then the other daughter comes along as well. And this year we pulled in a couple of extra people who are friends and members of the Salvation Army. But we're finding that we need younger volunteers. We reached out to Bermuda College to say, do you have people there who need community service and who would not mind joining us? I think it's not that they weren't interested. I think we reached out kind of late. So we will go back to that population because we think that's a way to help people, young people, get involved in service to their country and to their community, and reap the rewards of helping others, because it is very, very rewarding what we do as the Salvation Army. I believe I've covered everything, so I will stop there. Thank you.
And at this time, we'll get Mr. Craig Burt to just share a few words.
Good morning, Minister, and welcome to everybody that's here. And on behalf of the Commissioner, Jeffrey Borges of St. John Ambulance, I thank you for this opportunity to have us here to let the general public know what we do in support of the Bermuda government, especially the shelter in place and also some of the things with St. John Ambulance. We're grateful and thankful that we've been able to form a good relationship with Child and Family Services, primarily at the shelter during hurricanes. And just to outline a bit of what we have with the skill set at St. John's Ambulance, most people see us as the people that are going to the sporting events and all the major events, but also we're doing some different things as well, and the shelter in place is one of those. We do have 5 ambulances available that we can deploy at short notice, and we have 2 cars as well. We used to have a 6th one, but we've gotten rid of that. But the ambulances are fully stocked, just like the ones at the hospital, minus some of the more advanced equipment. But we are fortunate in that we have a wide range of skill sets with respect to the people that are assigned to the shelter. And just to let you know, we can staff at short notice. I understand, like with the last winter storm, it was 1 day's notice, but we have the ability to do that with the team that we have. So the skill set ranges anywhere from an initial first aid, a healthcare provider. We also have emergency medical responders, and then there's the EMTs, either basic or intermediate that we have, and we're now going to the level of, we have some paramedics as well, and then obviously the people that drive the ambulance. But the people that drive the ambulances are also have to have the higher level certification from the EMR and above, and then we also have our registered nurses, and then we also have the ability to call on doctors as well who volunteer with St. John Ambulance. So our skill set is quite varied. With the shelter part, we can do the testing of with the temperature screening first, but we know that some of the people that do come to the shelter have advanced medical conditions that must be treated. So one of the advantages of having St. John Ambulance there is that they're able to do vitals on the patient, and we do the pre-hospital care. And then if it gets to a stage where they can be stabilized there at the shelter, they'll do that and do the treatment. And then they also we network with the Bermuda Hospitals Board, as well as the Bermuda Fire Service and the police in some instances as well. If there's a need to transport, and then we would transport any patients that need the additional advanced medical care at KEMH. They will then make that decision to transport. So we're quite varied with St. John Ambulance. The one thing with us is that we're fortunate that some of the people that do volunteer with us when it comes to that emergency medical services part are actually employed within the medical field, whether at doctor's offices, at the Bermuda Fire Service, and also at the hospital. So we have that advanced knowledge, and we also understand that there's sometimes when you have to reach out to those other organizations for some additional information for the treatment part, so they have the context with respect to that. So we are like any other organization. We are fortunate. I'm new in the block at St. John Ambulance. So, I've only been there since 2016 and just took over the role of Deputy Commissioner in January of this year. But it's been an eye-opener for me. I've been trained in other organizations as well. But the one thing with us and with St. John Ambulance, I think, no matter what your certification is, whether it be the healthcare provider up to the paramedic nurse, we train on a regular basis. So like with us, our training session is every Monday night from 7 to the latest at 9 o'clock. And then we also have some other major disaster things that we network with other government agencies. So we have the ability for that network as well. And we do it till we're blue in the face. So even if it's something as simple as, hey, you have to learn how to lift a stretcher out of the ambulance, we rather make our mistakes there. They feed off each other. So we have an excellent group of people in the organization. We're all volunteers. So from the deputy commissioner down, we have various sections as well that people can tie into that helps with the shelter. So let's say if we get that call at short notice, let's say the commissioner, Mr. Borges, would then send something out to the events team. The events team will put the schedule up online. And then we also have a transport section. The transport section makes sure that all the ambulances are fueled up, stocked, and ready to roll in good condition. Then there's a quartermaster team as well, and they are responsible for stocking all the equipment in the ambulance. And then, say, there's a training section. They do all our training programs to make sure that our skills are up on par so that when we do go on these duties at short notice, we are ready to and able to deal with anything that comes onto us. And there's also times, even though we may be stationed at the Cedar Bridge shelter is the one that comes out the most, we also will deploy in the hurricane and EMO status. There's also an ambulance that is deployed to the Sylvia Richardson unit as well. And if needed to help provide backup support to the fire service and KMH, we also would at times put an ambulance up at Warwick Camp that can actually help to deploy units to the West End as well. So I don't look at it as we're competing with other organizations for, because I know the pool is short at present for volunteers, but we welcome that. And one thing with us, like I say, we're quite diverse in backgrounds and jobs as well, but we're a sponge of knowledge. And that's one thing. We can give you a skill set. And one thing I can say in my time at St. John Ambulance, I've seen that some of the people who have an interest in the medical field, they've actually gone on to be employees at Bermuda Hospital Board, either as EMTs at the hospital or and the fire service as well. So there's a network with the training that we do that we can assist to get you to the next step if you have an interest in that field. And there's just the sponge of knowledge and the knowledge base that they pass on to people. So we're always open to volunteers to help out. And one of the things we're doing now, I mentioned the major sporting events that people see, but we also provide assistance for the shelter in place. So when the shelter in place and everybody was on lockdown, we staff the center all night, and that started at Barclay Institute and then moved up to Cedar Bridge. So we have that ability, and we provide an ambulance on a daily basis at the vaccine center at Bermuda College. We staff that as well in case there are any medical emergencies that has to be dealt with where the patient is transported to the hospital. So we're quite diverse, and we expand our outreach into the community that way. But I say on behalf of, our new commissioner, Jeffrey Borges, thank you very much for providing this opportunity to talk about what St. John's Ambulance does in the community.
Thank you very much, Mr. Burt.
Thank you.
As Bermuda can see, this operation is quite involved, and it does take the community to help assist with our disaster shelter. And we want to thank you for joining us today. We hope that you feel empowered to offer your support to those most vulnerable in our community when they need it the most. And I have to say that I did have the opportunity to visit the disaster shelter, and the persons who do attend the shelter are most appreciative of the services that are provided to them. So we want people to think about volunteering. Sometimes you may think it's a surplus of time that you have to give, but sometimes it's not. And keep in mind that no act of compassion is too insignificant. We welcome when you are in need. Offer what you can, when you can, as all acts of service are essential. We never know when we or someone we know and love may be impacted by severe conditions and need support. With this in mind, let us come together and build a network of community support for emergency times. Thank you.
At this time, we'll go to the media for any questions.
Actually, I just have one question for Ms. Daniels. Sorry. Sure.
Yeah, she can go to the
Thank you, Ms. Daniels. Could you just say how many people would use the shelter at any given time, roughly? Are there any sort of numbers, and how many volunteers are you looking to get this year, and what sort of skills do your volunteers require?
So that is a question that really should come from my partners at Child and Family Services, because it varies.
Sure.
Some years, for example, Bermudians are interesting people. We don't readily run to a shelter. However, if we if we go out and we invite into the shelter those who are homeless, you could have some 40 people coming off the streets. In our emergency housing shelter, we average around 25 to 30 people, so they will join. So, and then on top of that, you have those people who are in there to actually man the shelter. You have your team of volunteers within that shelter, inclusive of the Cedar Bridge staff, the Child and Family Services staff, along with Salvation Army volunteers. So we're probably at 100 by now. And then if you have other members of the public who come in, let's say you have 12 people that year who decided to come in, because it varies. You could have 170 odd people, or you could have less. It just depends. We don't move quickly to shelters. We're excited about the fact that we have strong homes, and people are very reluctant to come into the shelter. But we need to continue to have a shelter.
So how many volunteers would you like to see?
So with social or physical distancing, we now have to be careful about the number of volunteers. But if you're asking how many volunteers we think we might need, we need a good pool of volunteers. I would say up to about 50 to 70 people, and those people can be deployed as needed. They might not all be needed at the same time. But if you look at the diversity of the organizations that help out, for example, there's Red Crosses in there as well. There's a number of entities. There's the health department, the nurses come in there. Now, of course, you wouldn't want volunteer nurses. But, when you think about it, there are a number of volunteers that we could utilize. Some pre-shelter setup, and some post.
But is it traditionally a problem getting volunteers?
Well, what happens is you have the same people who volunteer. That's the issue. It's not so much that you have problems, but those people, they have lives as well. And as I said, that's an aging population who have dedicated this time. So you need to replenish the pool. So yes, we do need volunteers.
Okay, Ms. Daniels, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay, so that concludes this press conference. Thank you so much, Bermuda.